All right, so I'm gonna try to get into a more masculine type of communication where logic starts to supersede, and this will give me practice on speaking clearly and having my points within my mind become more relevant as I'm speaking instead of just kind of like, I guess, so to speak, channeling. I'll just be speaking from my mind rather than speaking from how I feel. And with this one, I wanted to talk about the Tao Te Ching. And if you've read the book, or as you've read the book, you probably realize that the Tao Te Ching isn't really talking about anything. And it says the more you explain it, the less you know. But then the author goes into explaining a lot about the Tao. So kind of expressing that the author doesn't know anything about the Tao, which I think is the point. But then it goes to illustrate how someone has to think about the Tao in order to come to an understanding of the Tao. And the Tao is a very beautiful thing because it's the template from which I understand spirituality. In my other recordings, I've talked about the Tao and the Tao in different ways other than calling it the Tao. I refer to it as like the template or the space. And I kind of want to get more into that because as I get deeper into these recordings, there's going to be a lot of words and vocabulary that I use that's not accepted from the way I'm meaning them in social consciousness. The reason the reason of me doing these videos and prefacing everything before I start actually putting everything into a hyper masculine form and a presentation, if you will. I want to keep it feminine, I want to keep it creative, just so I could practice speaking. But going back to the Tao, the the understanding that the book tries to portray to you is that the Tao is unknowable and the Tao is unreachable, yet the Tao is ever present. And that sounds like a lot of things in spirituality. Like, it sounds like the Holy Spirit, it sounds like God, it sounds like our idea of deity, but it's not personalized, it's not put into a label of what it is. It's actually kind of put into label what it's not, and that what it's not translates to what it is, and it keeps going back and forth. It's this paradox that it keeps you going in and out of your mind. And it says if you think about the Tao, then you're missing the point of the Tao. And in a lot of meditations throughout the years that I've went went into and came out of, I started realizing that the frequencies that we're holding within our body kind of anchors us to this world, kind of like in the Lord Shiva. Like Lord Shiva had to eat food in order to stay on the lower planes, to still be active within that dimensional space. And like that's kind of like what our bodies do. Like the frequencies of our bodies, like the physical parts of our bodies, it it anchors us into this dimension, which some people say it's because like we've fallen, but then once you get to the idea of like we're falling but we're trying to do better, now we're rising, so you kind of have this down up effect. Like, who's to say that we're not going down and going up at the same time? Who's to say we've fallen? You know what I'm saying? Like, these concepts that we hear about in spirituality have no experiential value to them unless we experience it ourselves. Like if you experience yourself falling into a lower state, then I guess for you that's true, but for other people it's not. And that idea in itself, that one thing can be true but also not true at the same time, is that space I'm talking about. It's the frequency I'm talking about. And when I specify frequency, that specification of frequency isn't the actual thing I'm talking about. So that goes into like the concept of the Tao itself. So, but you can't intellectualize the Tao because you can't understand it in that way, which makes it very difficult to be like, this is the Tao. So, how can we understand what the Tao is? And the simple fact is, we can't. We can't understand the Tao. And that's the point. We're not supposed to understand the Tao. The Tao is supposed to be out of reach. And that's the idea that we're supposed to have of eternal. And the Tao is supposed to be before eternity. It's supposed to be the blanket of all things, which is why I call it the template. So when people are talking about spirituality, the more you try to intellectualize the Tao, the further you get away from it. But the further you get away from the Tao is the closer you get to it. So a practice of that is reading the Tao Te Ching or listening to it and going over in your mind, like, what is it talking about? What is it talking about? What is it talking about? And then all the ideas that you get from it, okay, this is what it is, internalize that, eat it, alchemically digest it. Then once you do that, let it go. Like, just let it go. It's like that concept and idea, yes, you held on to it, yes, you internalized it, but now just let it go. So when you ask yourself, what is the Tao? You answer it, this is the Tao. But then when you ask yourself again, what is the Tao? You say, I don't know. The Tao is everything. The Tao is nothing. And in this way, you keep your mind balanced with the things that it knows and things that it doesn't know. A lot of times when I'm speaking, I speak from a point of authority, but it's not that I'm speaking from authority. It's just that my experience makes me feel that the communication that I'm giving you is real. So it sounds like a certain way. And I have to work on that because I'm not an adept, I'm not an initiate, I'm not a master, I'm not a fifth dimensional being, alien coming down earth. I am just a literal human being. I am flawed. I am sometimes not a good person. Sometimes I'm a good person just to be a good person, but I'm really not a good person. And this creates a conflict within me because sometimes I don't know how to be. Because if I be who I want to be, then I get angry at myself for being that way because I know me being who I want to be is not going to make everybody happy. And it may seem with that statement that I'm trying to make everybody happy, but that's not it. I want everyone to feel included, but at the same time, I don't want to infringe on anyone's rights or my own rights, which in fact will make everybody not included. Like someone has to be excluded within the fact of not infringing on someone else. Because if I feel a way, I don't want you to come and tell me that you feel a different way and my way is wrong, because now you're infringing upon me, and vice versa, me telling someone their ideas are wrong. But there's this balance that has to take place, and in the Tao, it starts to formulate that within your mind. That idea that, hey, two things that are complete opposite can coexist within the same space and be equal to one another, and their forces not have to fight for superiority. There is a way to do that. Now, when you're first reading the Tao Te Ching from the perspective that I've got it, I thought it was talking about external things. Then I realized it was talking about internal things. So I thought it was talking about internal things and how you interact with the external world. But then I realized the Tao Te Ching is like every other spiritual scripture, has nothing to do with external forces. It has everything to do with internal forces and how you perceive your own internal forces. And it gets you thinking in a way that even though external forces are coming forth from the ether onto your being, you realize that those external forces are actually the forces within you. And even though another human being is interacting with you and pushing force upon you, no matter which plane it's on, then that that force is actually the force that's within you because you're picking it up. Like an example of that is someone that, let's say, is just annoying you, right? They're annoying you because, not because they're annoying, but because you're annoyed. You have that space within inside you that wants to be filled, and it's open, and that person is feeding you a vibration, and you're taking that vibration and you're eating it, and you're energetically holding that vibration. So you become annoyed, but you're not annoyed because that person is annoyed. You're annoyed because you have that space within inside yourself to become annoyed. So there's a deeper problem, and that deeper problem goes into the internal struggle within your own self. Maybe not wanting to be where you are in your life, or not getting the things that you feel like you deserve. And all of that is a template within inside yourself. Now, like Master Jesus said, you have to organize your house. You have to organize your mansion. Your mansion is your being. And the first place to start organizing is your mind. Because you have to understand the space that your mind holds is an infinite, eternal space. And you cannot grasp it all. But you have other faculties that help you key into certain things. And the Tao especially allows you to understand the keyed in points, but helps you try to release them, release the key points, release the channel markers of stream of consciousness that you're constantly receiving, and just be open to all consciousness. And the more and more you practice all consciousness, and or not saying not, but instead of saying all consciousness, we can also say no mind, because it's the same thing. All consciousness, like reaching out to try to obtain the world's energies within your mind, is the same thing as releasing yourself from your mind. Like trying to not escape your mind, but be one with your mind. And being one with your mind starts to supersede your mind. And you go into like you go into like the higher social consciousness of mind. And eventually you keep going through this stage with the Greeks called nous, which is all mind, which is what the Hermetic philosophies are based off of, universal mind. And at these points in spiritual developments, we start realizing who we are and who we want to be. But sometimes I feel like, at least for myself, that yeah, I want to be these certain things, but my morality is too high. Like I have too high of a moral compass. And you might think like that's not a bad thing, but you have to realize in a world that's covered in darkness, because we're still in the dark ages spiritually, and we're slowly coming out of it. Like the sun is slowly rising. We have to realize that, man, in order for me to be a good person, I have to understand the good and negative qualities of all things. So yeah, I may do a positive action, but that positive action for someone else may be negative. And sometimes I don't want to do a negative action because I feel like I should be above that, but sometimes you have to do a negative action to get a positive force, right? And it's hard understanding in which scenario to give that positive force or that negative force, or that masculine force or that feminine voice, or that understanding voice or that disciplinary force. It's hard to understand where that force is. So I always go back to like the phrase that's in one of the Tao Te Ching translations, which is a bad man is a good man's job. right? And my first understanding of that was I have to be a good man in order to help a bad man. Then my understanding got to the point to where it was I have to be a good man so I can show the bad man just by my own actions how to be better. Then my understanding grew to I have to be a good man to teach the bad man within me how to be better. So instead of it being a external force that I'm trying to show, like I'm trying to show you my light so you could be like me, which is pride. If you think about it, it's not pride on the level at what I'm doing it as, but it's pride in the eyes of the people looking at it because they don't understand your mind and your actions. So they're thinking they're doing that to be better. But really, you're doing that so you could lift yourself up and lift them up, but it's not perceived in that way. So we as spiritual people that hone in onto the articulations of faith that we hold and we try to enact them on the world, we have to realize that these spiritual forces aren't for us to enact on the world. Just like the Tao Te Ching says, the carpenter can't use the master carpenter's tools because they'll hurt themselves, and that's what we're doing. We're trying to use the mental forces that we're accumulating and try to enact them on the world. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be enacting them on ourselves. But we come back to the paradox of how do I know which force to enact on myself in order to get the situation that I want, or if you evolve that thought, and how can I be the best person in each scenario? You see what I'm saying? Like how can I be my best self? Or when you start thinking on like a karmic level, what can I do to reduce the karma of myself, thus reducing the karma of other people? And like that thought process is very difficult to understand because in each situation, each person calls for something different, and you don't know what that person truly needs. You can only really understand what you need, but you need time by yourself in solitude to understand what you truly do need. And a lot of the times we don't know what we need because we're so focused on the light, trying to obtain the light, that we're forsaking our darkness, and we're not understanding that the light is used not on the world to shine and do better in, but on ourselves to shine on ourselves, the dark, on our darkest part of ourselves, so we can map out our darkness, so we can transmute our darkness of a binding darkness into a triple darkness of just peace and serenity. And ultimately, that's what the darkness has to come to. And the Tao Te Ching has a beautiful poetic scripture that allows you to start seeing your darkness in that way. Because ultimately, the Tao Te Ching is just you, it's just your dark nature. And it's not the dark nature of like evilness and petrification. It's your dark nature of love. It's your dark nature of peace, of serenity, of control, of chaos, of all these logical ideas, but released and then left to their own natural devices. And when you leave something to its natural device in its purest form, it's only going to do what it's going to do, right? And in each situation, if we take that into our experiences in life, we can start to understand like, hey, I don't need to act a certain way or think I should be a certain way. I should just do what I think I should do in this moment. And if that moment is going off and acting a fool, I need to go off and act a fool then. If if all these things are occurring in my life and I react a certain way, allow yourself to react a certain way. Allow yourself to be in that space of fluidity so you can start understanding yourself even more. And the more and more you do this, you start realizing and start becoming self conscious of yourself. And me, at the stage I'm at, I feel like I'm highly self conscious of myself, especially when I'm talking, because I'm kind of stuck in between like social worlds to where when I talk like completely naturally and I'm completely comfortable, I use a lot of slang. I slur my words, but I'm also very proper. So slurring words and proper English mixed together makes me mumble. And then especially on top of that, when I get excited when I'm talking, and you can hear it in my recordings, I stumble over my words, I mix it all together, and it starts to become like a cohesive mesh of mumble jumbo, which I have to work on, of course, but it's also part of my energetic nature that is fighting to release itself, and I'm fighting it because I'm scared of what I might say or who I might offend. And in a way, that's good because I'm becoming mindful in the moment of what's happening. But I'm also that mindfulness is an obstruction to me instead of being a hands-off mindfulness. It's a Capricornian kind of mindfulness to where it's very controlled and it's very like a dam. Like, okay, you got a dam, you can only let so much water out at a time. And the practice of the Tao, which is releasing things and letting things just be naturally, the practice of that eases yourself into yourself to be okay with yourself so you can understand the flows of your own nature, so you can understand the understandings of your understanding and the multi layer of yourself to get to the deeper parts of yourself, which is which is actually the most outer parts of yourself. Because in the energetic space, we have these bodies, and our most outerest point of our body is our physical skin, which has all our nerves on it. Well, our most outer points of our spiritual body is eternity, and the eternity is the most furthest part away from us energetically, but it's also the beginning of us. So the more you stretch out and expand your frequency, the more you go in, and the more you go in to your center force of source, then the further you go out. It's a it's a beautiful it's a beautiful dance of doing things, doing two things at one time, and that two things at one time is one movement. And in your meditations, if you take that thought and understand going in is the same as going out, when you go in, you start to form the thought patterns of going out. And then you can go within inside yourself and go outside yourself at the same time in your meditations and continue those meditations. And eventually you'll get to the point to where you realize that going out and going in are the same thing through experience, and that experience is going to lead you further inside yourself, further deeper into deeper frequencies, aka higher frequencies, aka the same frequency that you hold that you're just not aware of consciously receiving. And all of this are just thoughts upon the Tao. All of these are just contemplations of the Tao over time. And the more and more you listen and read it, the more and more you can start to understand that your understanding has nothing to do with who you are. Your understanding is just a tool of who you are. And when you realize that you'll never understand yourself and you'll never find yourself, then you start to understand who you are. Then you start to understand what you are. Then you start to understand the gnosis of self. And the gnosis of self, to me right now at this stage, ultimately, is not self, is non-existence. And when you don't exist within the physical body, then you could be open to all things, and no thing is a hindrance anymore. And to that degree, those are what the adepts and masters are. They're unaffected by the things that we're affected by. And I'm pretty sure on some levels, on some high levels, they're affected by other things that they're learning to let go. Maybe maybe at a certain type of level you let go so much and all things are coming towards you, but now you need to gain control again. Now you need to specify. Now you need to channel that energy directly. And maybe that's the next stage of evolution, is to be able to let everything go and then gain everything back. But when I'm sure when you gain everything back, you're seeing it on a completely different level at